Welcome to our Photoshop tutorial. We're just going to start off with how to work with Photoshop and just sort of give you a first-hand view of Photoshop. If you've not used Photoshop before and you're a beginner, this is going to be really useful for you. Um, and once you get a hang of the basic layouts and what Photoshop does, we'll sort of jump into a few more intricate ways of using Photoshop. So let's get started. The first thing you want to do is open up Photoshop. I have a Mac PC here, so the way I would open it would be different. If you do have a regular PC, Windows PC, you can just go to search and look for Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop 2020. Make sure your Photoshop is updated and you have the latest version, which is the 2020 version. Once you have that, go ahead, double click. And this is probably the first page that would open out. This is just a landing page for Photoshop. It's where you, if you have an already recent file that you've worked with, you can pull that up here. So as you can see, you have a recent tab here, and these are the files that I had been editing recently. So those kind of pull up right there automatically. So when you're working on a file and editing it over and over again, and it's easier to just pull it up directly from there. But if you're new to Photoshop and you've not done anything, the best thing that you can do is you have two options here, either create or open a new file. So let's go ahead and look at what create new does. So you want to create a new file. So we're going to go ahead and click this tab. When you click that tab, you'll see a new box that opens up, a new window that opens up. And this window actually helps you customize your board that you want to create on Photoshop. So you have all the details here that you can enter for your customized board. So you can go ahead and enter your name for your board. So I'm just going to write this as my name, Dias board 1. Okay, so you can, depending on what you're working on, you can title it as in what you like it to be. Okay, these dimensions here are for the size of your artboard, and there are different ways you can provide sizes. You can provide sizes in terms of pixels, inches, centimeter, millimeter, points, because so it's easier to just work with inches because we are most comfortable with understanding the dimensions of inches. Okay, so with inches, let's just go ahead and put our width as 10 and our height as 10. So this will give you a nice square canvas to work on. You can do as in what you like, depending on what you're printing. When you're doing more advanced things, you can change the size of your board. And here you have the orientation. You have a portrait orientation and a landscape orientation for your board. Now, since we have both height and width as the same, it doesn't really matter because it's a square, right? Here you have the color mode, so you can choose the different types of color modes that you want to set for your board. You have a grayscale, so no matter what you do, it's always going to be in a grayscale. All the colors that you add in will always come in grays. RGB is your red, green, blue color scheme, and that's the most common, and it syncs well with your printer too, so you want to make sure you select your RGB. Okay. This is your background color. You want to always, ideally you want to do a white background, but if you have a particular image that you want to use, if you're on a black image or sorry, a black background, you can choose black, but let's just stick with white. Okay. Apart from these, another very important criteria that you want to make sure when you're creating an artboard is the resolution. Okay. So the resolution is the number of pixels you have per inch. Now, pixels are these little squares of color that show up in an inch of your screen. Okay, so if you have 72 pixels, that means in an inch, a square inch, you have 72 little squares that make up an inch, and those are going to give you as many colors, 72 different colors within that inch. So 72 is actually pretty low. Your file size would be smaller, but clarity would reduce. So the more number of pixels you have in an inch, the more detail, the more vibrant, the more colors you can get in. So ideally you want to keep a resolution of 300. That's the most standard pixels per inch resolution that you create when you're making an artboard. Okay. Obviously, like I mentioned, the higher you go, the better clarity you will get. But also remember, the higher you go, the heavier your file would also be. Okay, so let's just stick to 300. So this is something that you always need to keep in mind when you are working on any artboard. Remember to have a resolution of 300 and make sure you work with a width and height and a color scheme that you want to work with, okay? Once you've done all this, go ahead and click create. And then there you go. You have your artboard, and this is what your Photoshop working file looks like. Okay, so this is where you will be working on, and in the next tutorial we'll go over some of the basic things that you will see on Photoshop, and what are the tools that you would work with and how you work around with it. Okay, so for now, as long as you understand how to create a 10 by 10 inch artboard, 300 pixels in an RGB color scheme, you are good to go. All right.